December 1939, and Britain freezes amid a severe cold snap. Snow covers the ground, and only the faint sound of carols breaks the cold, still air. If we didn't know better, we'd call it a typical white Christmas. But it isn't. The country is at war. This was the first of 6 festive seasons like no others.
Emily, Bryson, dinners on the table.
Cool.
So that is wartime. Tanning.
Now, one family is turning back the clock to experience their own version of a wartime Christmas.
This is what World War II people had for their Christmas.
It's breakfast.
They'll be plunged into a world of blackouts.
They didn't ring the doorbell and say, "Excuse me, madam, you're showing a light." They would stand on the pavement and shout very rudely, "Put that light out."
Like today, the 1940s saw its own energy crisis and countless other shortages.
Her dressing gown used to be an old quilt, and her pajamas came from discarded curtains.
There was all sorts of leaflets telling you how to do things like how to make sure your clothes don't get moth, how to make corsets last longer.
Oh, no!
And spiralling costs meant unusual food choices. With creative Christmas dinners.
Oh, it's nice. It's tasty.
I think I might want seconds.
And DIY defences against the enemy.
Well, like a lot of simple designs, it was actually genius in many ways.
You're not actually going to leave me, are you? Oh, bye.
Got some decorations.
Oh, no.
And with Britons today facing the biggest financial squeeze since the war, perhaps a few lessons from the past might make this one the best Christmas ever.
There you go. Ta-da!
This is London. You will now hear a statement by the Prime Minister.
September the 3rd, 1939. When Britain declared war on Germany, the country was turned upside down. Troops got ready for combat. Factories switched to making munitions. And as the sirens sounded, up to 1 million children were evacuated from the big cities to the supposed safety of the countryside.
Remember that the government has its own plans for the evacuation of school children and others.
For those who stayed with their families, the next 6 Christmases would be far different to those that had gone before. And in this programme, we're going to recreate them, starting with the first.
Yeah, the weather's been really bad. No, it's really windy. Just with the kids. Yeah.
Meet the thoroughly modern Decker family from Kent. Dad Phil, Mum Louise, 13-year-old Amelie, and Bryson, who's 9.
Is this the house?
I think it must be number 2. Yeah, it must be.
Yeah, it must be.
What's that there, Bryson?
Please deposit all electronic devices.
Oh. Go on in.
We're transporting them back over 80 years to our wartime house, where we'll give them a series of tasks, helping to relive those Christmases past. And it won't be what they're used to.
We have like a ginormous Christmas tree with like loads of bulbs and everything, and it's so cool. And like we got a big living room and everything.
Yeah, we're a pretty modern family. We keep up to date with the gadgets and bits and pieces. So to all of a sudden be without those things now, it would be really difficult.
Wow.
Look at the kitchen!
Oh, the food! Wow. Oh.
Of course, there's pictures.
All the family are expecting to be taken back to a time when Christmas was simpler and when Britons learned to make do.
Look at this.
Wow, it's still
Is it
hot.
arranged? So if my kids had been evacuated and my husband was away at war, look at the duck. I would have to find something to do, and I would need to feel useful as if I was doing something to help. Look at the makes. Do you recognise the makes? You've got like Nestle's milk.
That one at the top looks a bit like...
I'd like to see how the Christmases changed through the years of the war, so how it started compared to how it ended, especially with resources people had.
I think I might learn that Christmas is definitely different in this period, and I feel like it's going to make me think more about how lucky I am.
Right then. Dishes. This packet contains 12 dried eggs.
In 1939, millions clung onto the hope that the war would all be over by Christmas. For those who thought it was about to get worse, this was the opportunity to have one last big blowout.
Christmas 39 was in many ways a pre-war Christmas. There was no rationing yet. They were holding it off till January so that you can have one last ration-free Christmas, was the phrase. We trust that you will all be sensible and only buy what you really need. Of course, nobody took any notice whatever. Realising that rationing was coming, they splurged as much as they could.
Restaurants are full, people are going to visit wherever they can, they're staying in hotels. They're having anything and everything they can do before things get really bad, which could be any day now. So it's a really marked, celebratory Christmas, if you like.
Coming up, the first wartime Christmas gets underway. In the dark.
Let's get this thing. I'm going to need your help over here.
Okay. You had policemen and air raid wardens going around checking, and if they saw a light, they would deal with it.
And your neighbours could be quite nasty about it. People were known to get an odd brick through the window.
What do you think?
It's perfect.
At the start of World War II, the country prepared itself for the inevitable Luftwaffe raids. Nighttime bombers had their targets, but to find them, they needed light, and Britons were determined to make it as tough as possible for them. As well as being a white Christmas, 1939 would be a dark Christmas.
One of the first things that would have come in was the blackout. The idea was that you had to have very thick curtains at your windows. Street lights were all switched off. Shops were not allowed to have lights in the windows after a certain time and so on, so that the whole area would be darkened and that the enemy would find it much, much more difficult to locate positions.
Anyone failing to switch off risked the anger of the Air Raid Precaution, or ARP, wardens.
You had policemen and air raid wardens going around checking, and if they saw a light, they would deal with it.
They didn't ring the doorbell and say, "Excuse me, madam, you're showing a light, would you mind?" You know, they would stand on the pavement and shout very rudely, "Put that light out."
Yes, they were seen as a pain in the backside. And your neighbours could be quite nasty about it. People were known to get an odd brick through the window.
If our family's windows are going to stay intact, they're going to have to perform the first of their tasks that we've set up for them.
I don't know. Let's have a look. Oh, shut the door.
It says laundry inside of the basket.
Right, let's have a look. Right, let's see. It says your instructions are contained within this envelope. Air raid precautions, blackout. Blackout tonight is from 5:30. A lighting order has been made under Defence Regulation number 24. The effect of the order is that every night from sunset to sunrise, all lights inside buildings must be obscured and lights outside buildings must be extinguished. Failure to fully observe blackout precautions is an offence. Repeat offenders will be prosecuted.
So that's tonight at 5:30?
Yep. If blackouts are in there, must be all bits and pieces.
Let's have a look.
Towers and some pins.
Yep.
We've got some black material so we can obviously black out the windows.
Let's go over the windows and doors, I think.
Thick blanket.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we can drape the blankets over things, over the doors, or the window. But we've got to cover any light. Every light's got to be out.
That's it.
Yeah.
In the run-up to the dark Christmas, families would use picture frames to hold carpets, rugs and towels in place. They'd then hang them as makeshift curtains, sealing any gaps around the edges with brown paper or cardboard.
I'm going to need a hand with this, Phil.
Yeah.
I think if we were plunged into total darkness, it would be very strange, and you really would feel cut off from everybody. It's a couple of days off.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that all done?
Yeah.
Special blackout curtains became available. As washing them could weaken the fabric and let in light, the government instructed people to brush, shake or vacuum them instead.
It would just be really weird to not be socialising and see anyone through your window at night.
What do you think?
I think the ARP warden will be very happy with that.
There's nothing, is there? There's
Can't see any
absolutely
light.
not a tiny bit making out.
That's perfect.
Good job, my dad's
That's good.
Blacking out houses, entire streets and neighbourhoods may have been a safety measure, but it brought its own hazards. In the first 4 months of the blackout, nearly 4,000 people were killed on the unlit roads.
Incredibly dangerous. The reason we have lighting at night is a lot to do with road safety, to do with just getting about safely. So road accidents, particularly children killed in road accidents, absolutely soared.
So you accommodated this by wearing something white, if possible. White waistcoats, white bands around their hats. Women were encouraged to wear white stockings, but in the end, what most people did was to carry a newspaper and wave that as they walked down the road.
But as Christmas approached that year, the expected bombing raids still hadn't materialised. So hopes of a normal celebration rose. So much so, some of the evacuees began to return to the cities.
Yes, they were missing their home and their families, such as were still at home, were missing them.
And of course, more and more parents were saying, well, let's have them back for Christmas. Worse still, the King and Queen brought the royal evacuees, the princesses. They came back that Christmas. A lot of people said, well, if it's good enough for the King and Queen, it's good enough for our kids as well.
The trickle turned into a flood. In the end, up to 400,000 children made it home in time. The first wartime Christmas was underway.
We've got some decorations! Should we use them?
Put some tinsel on the couch.
We usually go over the top with the kids, far too much as usual, but they enjoy it. It's a nice time of year for them, so.
Although blackout rules meant there'd be no lights, bright and cheerful decorations were unlimited.
Wrap it around the chair.
Unlike the holiday itself.
One of the things that's different, I think, in terms of Christmas then, and even pre-war, as opposed to now, is it was a very much shorter holiday. Christmas and Boxing Day were really the days you had off. It wasn't the kind of Christmas Eve to New Year's Day event that it's become in very recent times in our history.
It's from pink.
They would have one or two gifts. It wouldn't be a huge pile of stuff. And certainly, as the war came in, that became even more marked.
We haven't finished yet.
In 1939, Christmas presents took on a strong wartime theme.
So you might get a nice gas mask case. A child would want their own tin helmet. You would get sweetheart brooches if you're boyfriend or girlfriend was in the forces, you might have a little ATS brooch or a badge or whatever. So there were very sort of war-directed presents. The newspapers and magazines were full of adverts and articles about what to send to the Tommies abroad. Things like dartboards and playing cards and cigarettes, a drink, of course.
In the days before most households had TVs, let alone the internet or games consoles, there was one vital piece of technology.
Radio was hugely important during the war. Virtually everybody had access to a radio. That's where the news came from.
Well, I'll push a piece of putty down the pants and pass away.
You also had an enormous number of very popular comedy programs. It's That Man Again with Tommy Handley and all those catchphrases.
Can I do you now, sir?
That people would go around repeating. So it was something that very much brought the country together.
The wireless or radio kept families informed, lifted their spirits, and even gave birth to a cherished Christmas tradition.
The festival, which we know as Christmas, is, above all, the festival of peace and of the home.
The royal Christmas message had begun in 1932, but now in wartime, it would be more important than ever. King George VI battled with his famous stammer as he urged his people to stay strong.
It went down hugely well. People would say that Dad stood to attention in the front room listening to this.
We feel in our hearts that we are fighting against a wickedness, and this conviction will give us...
There was lots of emotions involved in that speech, especially for him and the way he spoke and had to speak and his troubles with speaking publicly, as well as the war.
Until victory is assured.
It went down so well that the government the following year said, would you do another one? And then another one and another one. And by the time the war had finished, it had become an institution that is still with us today.
Coming up, the so-called Blitzmas of 1940. As Britain takes cover from the bombs.
So if you get in, you can help me put this on.
How families built their DIY shelters.
It's clever though, isn't it? Because you'd have your dinner on top of it, and then when the siren happens, you'd climb under it and you're safe.
Yeah, instead of running out into the garden.
Yeah.
In Christmas 1939, the war was only a few months old, so many families ate, drank and were merry like the old days, while they could. Because 12 months on, it would be a very different story.
Christmas 1940 was a huge difference to Christmas 39. I suppose you could call it the first real wartime Christmas, the first time that the rationing and the privations of war were really hitting Christmas in a big way.
The problem with this country then, and to a large extent now, was although we could grow a lot of food here, we choose not to. We choose to import it.
More than 150 ships a day must bring their cargoes to British docks. For to exist in war or peace, England must import nearly all the food she eats.
At the time the war broke out, Britain imported huge quantities of food from overseas. New Zealand butter or lamb, Danish bacon, all those sorts of things were imported. We imported a huge amount of onions from Spain.
In a bid to starve Britain into submission, Hitler's U-boats attacked ships bringing in those vital imports. Some still got through, but as food supplies dwindled, the government had to limit the amount every household could buy each week. They called it rationing.
In 1 week, no adult Briton may buy more than 2 ounces of butter, 4 ounces of bacon or ham.
Like today, during the war, many people had to make tough decisions about what they could afford to put on their Christmas table.
What is it? Go get it.
It's a pigeon.
Go get it. Go get it.
It's got it.
It's 2 pigeons. Oh, hello. Oh. Wood pigeon. Farm pest to kitchen best. Deep, gamey and tender. Pigeon is a popular meat in many cuisines. Knowing how to prepare a pigeon for the table would be an invaluable skill for the wartime housewife. Preparing your pigeon, pinch the feathers between your thumb and forefinger, then pluck the feathers towards the head, trying to avoid tearing the skin. Oh, it's sticky. Ooh. I'd never thought about eating pigeon before. It sounds quite disgusting. And I definitely never thought I'd be plucking a pigeon. Once a bird is plucked, remove the head, wings and feet using a sharp pair of secateurs to cut through the joints and a sharp knife.
Pigeon was just one source of unrationed meat for those in rural areas. Others included rabbit, hare and rook.
You then need to draw the bird by removing the innards.
Oh, come on, Mum.
You do it. I didn't particularly like gutting it, but once you got into doing it and you were in the motions and you knew it was for food, which you all needed to feed your family, then you just got on with it, really. Amelie felt quite uncomfortable with it. She's not very good with blood and bits and pieces anyway, and she definitely wasn't as interested in all the insides as I was when I was pulling them out. There you go, Amelie, 1 pigeon, all ready to go and ready to be cooked. I never, ever thought I could do that to an animal. I don't really cook. I don't prepare a turkey or a chicken. So to do that to a pigeon, I was really pleased with myself.
I did kind of expect my mum to pluck the pigeon and take all its innards out because she loves watching all these gory films with all these blood and guts and everywhere, and she just finds it funny.
Just pop that in a baking tray. 2 pigeons, a bit of lard. Lovely.
But putting food on the table was only a minor concern for families during Christmas 1940. A much bigger worry was whether they'd be around to eat it.
And there's the wail of the banshee. The nightly siege of London has begun.
By late December 1940, Britain had been under constant attack for nearly 4 months in a Nazi bombing campaign known as the Blitz.
Night after night, for month after month, bombers were coming over and dropping bombs seemingly indiscriminately on towns and cities all across the country.
These are not Hollywood sound effects. This is the music they play every night in London, the Symphony of War.
When a bomb raid started, if my mother was way on the other side of the house, we would rush and open the front door and run out into the garden looking at the bombs, which terrified my mother. Get back in here!
In the weeks leading up to Christmas, the government had issued nearly 2 million households with makeshift corrugated iron bunkers, known as Anderson shelters. Martin Stanley still has one half buried in his London garden.
Well, like a lot of simple designs, it was actually genius in many ways. First of all, the eggshell oval shape is very good at withstanding pressure from outside. Ditto, the corrugation made the whole thing much stronger than a thin sheet of metal which will bend. So it was a very simple but amazingly strong structure.
First, dig a pit 4 feet deep. Then, build your shelter inside it.
We always used to go and hide under the stairs because under the stairs was the safest place in the house. We had an Anderson shelter in the garden, but it flooded and it was full of spiders and everything, and it never got used.
Despite the cold and discomfort, there was still the odd rough-and-ready luxury included.
Each shelter came with, I think, 6 beds. So there'd be 2 for adults each side and 2 smaller ones for children at the end. And these were the frames of the beds. Because there was no electric lights, of course, but they had these tiny little oil lights to give them a bit of comfort. It really was the only sensible thing to do, was to get into the shelters.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way.
But not everyone had a garden, nor could everyone build an Anderson shelter.
Oh, someone's at the door.
Our family's about to receive a very special do-it-yourself Christmas present.
Please go out to the backyard where you will discover your next task. Instructions are contained within this envelope. Oh. What's this?
Oh.
What do you think it is?
Not quite sure, really.
Looks like a table.
A lot of metal.
Let's open this then. Let's have a look at the instructions. Oh, look.
Oh, no.
A Morrison shelter. Steel table shelter. Oh, look. Is that a bed underneath it?
Oh, no.
Domestic steel table. Shelter for 2 adults and 1 child. Detachable mesh sides. Allow the shelter to be used as a table. I see. Oh, look, there you go.
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
But I think me, Phil and Amelie, we all like doing bits and pieces at home. I love getting an IKEA flat pack and making that and putting that together.
I think this is the top. I think this is the wrong way round. We need to put this down on the floor first. That's it. That's it. Go back towards you. That's it. That's it. And lay it down.
The Morrison shelter was built for those who couldn't have an outdoor shelter.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I think that's in now.
So it was like a box in which you slept with wire sides, wire mesh sides, and a very thick steel roof. And the idea was you got inside and pulled the wire sides in, and if your house did collapse because of the bombing, the roof would take the weight and you could be dug out later.
Okay. That's it. So I think you need to get in. We've got to try it. So if you get in, you can help me put this on. So how would they have done that in wartime? So you'd be bolting yourself in, basically. It's clever, though, isn't it? Because you'd have your dinner on top of it, and then when the siren happens, you'd climb under it, and you're safe.
Yeah, instead of running out into the garden.
Yeah. So you're comfortable under there?
Not really.
What do you think, Louise?
Tease up, come on.
Lovely.
You're not actually going to leave me, are you? Oh, bye.
Due to the relentless aerial attacks, the 1940 festive season became known as the Blitzmas. Just like today, money was scarce, so useful wartime gifts were the order of the day.
Popular presents in 1940 were far more practical. A siren suit would have been what we might today call a onesie, would have been a wonderful present to get. You were being dragged out of your bed in the middle of the night to go down to the shelter by the sirens. And you had to dress very quickly and very warmly. Sleeping bags, bunk beds, torches, blackout torches, things, all of those kind of things that had a practical use for you in the raids were good.
A packet of steel wool is one present I remember reading about. A tin of custard powder. Things that would be quite small scale. Even by the standards of Christmas at that time.
And I can remember in 1940 being a bit put out that I hadn't got very much for Christmas.
You'd have a sock at the end of your bed with some nuts in it and perhaps an orange or something, not much more.
But for many waking up on Christmas morning, there would be no presents at all. In the most heavily bombed areas, like London's East End, they had no choice but to spend yet another night in the relative safety of underground stations.
The authorities made the decision in advance people were not going to shelter in the tubes. However, the people decided they were going to shelter down there. So what people did at first was they would simply buy tickets and stay down there. Now, the conditions were pretty putrid. I mean, it was smelly down there. There were a few chemical toilets, but a lot of very lonely people were very happy down there. People who had no sense of community in the outside world found a community down in the tubes.
I think must have been about at least 20 of us in the shelter. And suddenly there was an enormous explosion which sounded very near. And one of the ladies, who was very nervous, said, "Oh, what was that?" You know, and one of the men, just to try to calm her down and be funny, said, "Oh, it was only a horse and cart," you know. And this lady said, "Oh, no, it was too loud to be a horse and cart." So this guy said, "Oh, well, all right, it was two horses and carts," you know. Well, that produced a big laugh, but it relieved the tension.
As the first real wartime Christmas came to an end, Britain had discovered a new sense of community, togetherness, and determination. This would be forever known as the Blitz spirit.
Out of their ability to survive the destruction of their cities and their homes, to accept privation and sudden death, has emerged a nation stronger, more resolute, and more united than ever before.
Blitz spirit was, in essence, real. People actually brought together by the danger, by the circumstances. So you had a kind of empathy and understanding in the country that you had never had before.
Next, Christmas 1941, when Turkey made way for a sensible and cheaper vegetable pie.
If I get given that and that's all I could eat for Christmas dinner, I'd be a little bit disappointed.
Britain dances too with growing confidence. It's been a year since the fall of France, and the threat of invasion is all but past.
By Christmas 1941, Britain had a new ally in the fight against Hitler. America had entered the war, and GIs were getting ready to be stationed around the country. But victory was still a long way off. And although the bombing had finally subsided, the shortages of food and other goods were worsening.
You were shopping around for Christmas from January onwards. If you were in the high street and you saw a queue outside a shop, you joined it. You didn't ask what was on sale. There was something at the other end worth having.
That Christmas, even clothes were rationed. And if people were feeling the squeeze, they had to get creative.
For instance, Mrs. Quilty. Her dressing gown used to be an old quilt, and her pajamas came from discarded curtains.
Rather like our cost of living crisis today. The wartime government had to step in with helpful schemes.
There was Sow and Save and Make, Do and Mend. But it's all sorts of leaflets telling you how to do things like how to make sure your clothes don't get moth, how to make corsets last longer. So lots and lots of instruction and information.
When women were urged to knit for victory in the run-up to the homemade Christmas of 1941, millions had to do it with a shortage of wool. So how difficult is it to repeat their wartime tricks?
Your instructions are contained within this envelope. Important documents enclosed. Are you ready?
Yep.
Make, do, and mend.
Oh.
Unpick and knit again.
Oh, no.
If knitting wool is scarce, you can undo old, unwanted woolen items. Simply wind the wool around a bottle filled with hot water, and once the bottle has cooled down, you have wool that's ready to be used again.
What? How's that supposed to work? So we can unpick along the side.
Right, so if we're that far in, then can we start unpicking these bits here?
By 1941, you're seeing more homemade gifts. Perhaps knitting you a scarf, knitting you a balaclava helmet, making you out of scraps a felt waistcoat.
Oh, look, I've got even more.
You can wrap that round.
With further restrictions on food rationing, having a bird for Christmas was now a luxury only a few could afford. So the head chef of London's Savoy Hotel came up with a cheaper, meat-free alternative named after the Minister for Food, Lord Woolton.
As it say on here, your instructions are contained within this envelope. Important documents enclosed. Oh, the Woolton pie.
So what ingredients did you need for the Woolton pie?
OK, so the recipe, take 1 pound each diced potatoes, cauliflower, carrots, 3 or 4 spring onions if possible.
That's about right, I think.
I tend to do all the cooking, and that's just through choice, really, because I enjoy it. That's all right.
And essentially, Woolton pie is incredibly varied. It's a potato pastry case, and then it's filled with vegetables, whatever vegetables you have to hand. I mean, most vegetarians today would have had a version of Woolton pie, even if it wasn't called that.
And then for the crust, I think the monotony of wartime food would have been quite tough to get used to. I don't think there was much choice. There certainly wasn't many ingredients available, so I think you'd run out of ideas very quickly.
The things that weren't rationed were vegetables, bread, potatoes, things which nowadays we know are better for you than all that sugar and the fat. So all of the things that we now say you shouldn't have much of, you didn't get much of during the war.
I think wartime food would have been really boring because they had to just make do with what they had. And it was all vegetables and just stuff that isn't really exciting.
Nearly.
That's huge. Oh, that looks cool, though. I was going to do one little one.
Right, here we go. If you put it on the top shelf.
There we go. Very good.
Well, I think this pie's ready now. OK. Oh, this looks good. Oh.
Ooh, that's really good. How many pies do I do us on the table? I like it's really good.
As well as being a popular addition to family dinner tables, Woolton pie became a wartime staple in hotels and factory canteens.
OK, Bryson, give me a plate. You're first.
Oh, no.
You get the biggest bit.
Oh, no.
Oh, this is nice.
It's going to be delicious.
I don't think it was that bad. I think it was quite nice. I think there's certain things you could do with the flavour to spruce it up a little bit. But I think it was actually quite nice. Very easy to make as well.
To give it that extra flavour, many families would add instant gravy.
Oh, it's nice. It's tasty.
Ah, delicious.
I like it.
I've nearly finished. I think I might want a second.
But not everyone was impressed, then or now.
I've noticed we're all tucking in, but Emily, you're not eating very much. What do you think of it?
I think I definitely like pastry, and I don't really have that much pastry. So, and I do like the vegetables, but I'm not quite sure. It wasn't that interesting, and I would prefer if it had meat in it. If I get given that, and that's all I could eat for Christmas dinner, I'd be a little bit disappointed.
Well, I really like it.
Delicious.
In 1941, sitting round the Christmas table wasn't possible for everyone. That December, over 3.25 million men and women were away from home, bravely playing their part.
There was never, ever a talk of defeat. It never occurred to me in my wildest dreams that Germany could win the war.
But victory for Britain was still far from assured. The war that many thought would be over 2 Christmases ago showed no sign of ending.
Kill or be killed in bitter street fighting.
Then on Christmas morning 1942, Britain wakes to a sound unheard for 3 years.
That year, a new thing happened. That year, they did ring out for Christmas Day. The church bells had been silent since almost the beginning of the war because they were the sign for invasion. People hearing it would take confidence and joy from that.
For the past 3 wartime Christmases, Britain has been living with food restrictions, enemy bombing raids, and blackouts. While on the battlefield the tide might be turning as Allied forces make progress abroad, conditions at home are getting harsher.
The ration was becoming more stringent. There were fewer supplies. There was no immediate end in sight. These were, if you like, the sort of dark middle years of the war.
Those dark middle years are what now lie in store for the Decker family.
Look at the ducks.
So far, Dad Phil has gone through the first 3 wartime Christmases along with Mum, Louise, and children Emily and Bryson.
Look at the doll. You've got a doll's pad. Oh my God.
But as Britain strengthens its fighting forces, he's been called up, and he'll miss the family festivities for the first time.
It was very difficult leaving. I know that this was just an experiment, but I can only imagine how difficult it would have been at the time. It must have been absolutely horrendous, especially not knowing if you're going to come back or not.
I would feel quite nervous, actually, if my dad went to war, because I'll be like, where did he go? Is he going to come back? What's going to happen?
By 1942, nearly 4 million men had been called up to serve.
At the start of the war, Britain really wasn't prepared. The German army was something like 7 or 8 times as big as the British army in 1938. So an act was introduced imposing conscription on all men aged between 18 and 41. So Britain understood that it needed a large army and it needed it quickly.
So while Dad's away, it's all hands on deck to make this Christmas special.
Look, we've got another task. Ooh.
And with the wartime cost of living crisis to contend with, it's time to get inventive.
Chicken wire Christmas tree. It's a bit strange.
Mustn't be able to have a Christmas tree, so they're going to have to make one out of chicken wire. Oh, it's really sad, isn't it? But it's fun.
Yeah. Instructions. Cut a square of chicken wire. Chicken wire can be very sharp, so make sure you wear gloves for this.
Throughout the war, real Christmas trees were scarce due to labour shortages and the hazards of shipping.
Bring that corner over, I think. That's it.
Yeah, and then it makes more of a cone. There we go.
There we go.
But resourceful families could make their own artificial version, crafting a cone with wire and adding a makeshift base and trunk.
Insert the broom handle into the base, pushing it firmly to ensure a tight fit.
Should we do it at the same time?
Yeah.
Eat squid. The chicken wire Christmas tree was brilliant. It was quite sad to see this sad little Christmas tree. It was really lovely to make that and to make use of what you had. Good.
There we go.
Look at that. It was a bit dangerous because there was lots of sharp edges and bits and pieces, so I was glad we had gloves on. Do you think it's fun building a Christmas tree?
Yes, definitely. I'm quite impressed how they thought of all those things.
Should we have a chicken wire Christmas tree at home?
I think our normal Christmas tree would be fine.
Trees weren't the only items in short supply in December 1942. Rationing, introduced nearly 3 years earlier, was threatening even the simplest of Christmas gifts.
Now we also have two new forms of rationing by 1942. Soap is rationed in February 42, and so a bar of soap, a scented bar of soap, you're not going to get that at Christmas even. And sweets are rationed in July 1942. Box of chocolates, forget it.
And roasting chestnuts round an open fire was off the menu because coal was rationed too, creating a wartime energy crisis for British families everywhere. Also restricted were fresh eggs, just one every fortnight. But on offer from North America was an alternative, the powdered egg.
In a porcelain and stainless steel breaking room, the shells are broken and their contents removed. A suction cup drains every drop. An expert egg breaker handles 48,000 eggs a day.
So for your family Christmas breakfast, you're going to prepare some delicious mock fried eggs. So you need 1 egg reconstituted, 2 slices of wholemeal bread, salt and pepper.
Salt and pepper.
And then there's the method, but shall we get everything together first?
Yes.
Is
that egg?
Smell it.
No.
It smells like dog.
Due to the shortage of meat, the government believed supplementing diets with protein-rich dried egg was especially important, and it issued leaflets encouraging their use.
So we need 1 level tablespoon of egg powder.
1 packet was the equivalent of 12 fresh eggs, and it lasted 18 months.
Now, guys, you need to put 2 level tablespoonfuls of water into here.
To hydrate, 1 tablespoon of egg required 2 tablespoons of water.
And can you cut in the centre of each piece of bread a hole out? It's going to keep that because we're going to cook that bit as well. We're not going to waste anything.
Powdered eggs, we had to mix it up for my mum. She would give us the basin and mix it up. It was very rubbery, I remember, but then I didn't know any different, you see.
Right, you ready to eat? This looks yummy, doesn't it?
The bread tastes all right.
Yeah?
Yep.
It's not as bad as I thought.
Quite yummy, isn't it? Powdered eggs are a winner.
After rustling up a delicious meal nowadays, we settle down for a bit of Christmas telly, but not in the 1940s. At the outbreak of war, there were only 20,000 TV sets in the whole country, and only the rich could buy them. The affordable entertainment for the masses was the silver screen.
Cinemas were really central to entertainment at this time. But going a couple of times a week was perfectly normal. So people would go along individually, with friends, as a group. You know, it was the thing to do. There was no television.
And in 1942, there was one Christmas film that captured the hearts and minds of wartime Brits.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
They're the most famous of the lot, and as a kid I can still vividly remember it. Bing Crosby singing White Christmas.
Glisten and children listen.
Released as part of the soundtrack to the movie Holiday Inn, White Christmas was the first commercially successful, non-religious Christmas song. Its nostalgic lyrics and catchy tune made it an instant hit on both sides of the Atlantic.
White Christmas is just everything about Christmas, and it takes you away in the way you want to be taken away from the dreary realities of war.
Holiday Inn starred Bing Crosby and Marjorie Reynolds, but it was Irving Berlin's composition of White Christmas that won the Oscar.
And may all your Christmases be white.
Next, as wartime shortages worsen, the temptation to buy presents by illegal means. By December 1943, Britain had been fighting for more than 4 years, and the once invincible Nazi enemy was looking increasingly vulnerable.
1943 was a good year for the Allies. You had victory in North Africa, you had the invasion of Sicily, then the invasion of Italy, and you had bombing going deep into Germany.
But on the home front, optimism, like everything else, was in short supply. No one could predict when the end would come. And that Christmas, even the king sounded downbeat.
We know that much hard working and hard fighting, and perhaps harder working and harder fighting than ever before, are necessary for a victory.
It was just another wartime Christmas. More shortages, even more short than last year. More problems finding things to give. It was almost unwelcome when it came.
With the shelves almost bare, buying personal luxuries or gifts for friends and family was out of the question for most, at least if they stuck to the rules. For others, there was an alternative source of supply.
The black market, very simply, developed out of the existence of rationing. And what that meant was that people took advantage of the situation, and they didn't think of it as immoral.
Illegal trading became so widespread, the government appointed 900 inspectors to try to stamp it out, with hefty fines. But the potential profits were so great that black marketeers, or spivs, were prepared to take the chance.
And we've all seen Dad's Army and Private Walker, the black marketeer there, who's always got some knicker elastic or a bottle of scotch or whatever. There was, of course, also the under-the-counter stuff. Anything that was really a bit unusual, you didn't get hold of it, that would be kept under the counter for favoured customers, as Jones the butcher is always doing with his sausages or his bit of liver or whatever.
By the mid-war years, real-life butchers, with their normal supplies curtailed, were looking at different products to stock, especially at Christmas. So as a special festive treat, we prepared an alternative Christmas roast for the Deckers.
Oh, delicious! This looks yummy. Oh, should we have a slice each?
Yeah.
There you go. You don't want anything else?
No, that's enough.
Right, let's see. A centrepiece for your Christmas feast. While most meat was rationed during the war, there were some exceptions. So for your Christmas meal, you're going to enjoy a delicious joint of horse.
I don't want to eat this.
In the absence of turkey or duck, many cash-strapped families in wartime Britain sat down to the cheaper and more readily available horse meat.
It just tastes like lamb.
You don't mind eating horse?
If I had to, I would. Eating the horse meat was very yummy. I loved it. I had 2 slices. It was amazing. I wouldn't mind if I had that every day, like for dinner.
You gonna eat some?
Maybe. It was a good experience. It was a bit chewy though, and I don't think I'd want to eat it again.
So I suppose having any sort of meat, and especially this much, would be really lovely at Christmas, wouldn't it? I wouldn't want horse meat again because it was a horse, and I don't want to eat a horse. I want to eat our regular sheep and cows. You're really liking that, aren't you, Bryson?
Yeah, now you know what to get for me. Oh, that's good. This is the stuff.
By 1943, the British Christmas needed a pick-me-up, and it arrived in the form of American GIs, sent here to prepare for the D-Day invasions. With over 500,000 US troops to choose from, British families were only too happy to invite them indoors to celebrate Christmas with a swing.
Basically, everybody won from this arrangement because the American would have a nice place to stay, he would be in the bosom of a family even if it wasn't his own, and the British family would get all kinds of things from the American that they couldn't possibly hope to get anywhere else. They could get hold of meat, they could get hold of sweets and Hershey's chocolate and fruits and fruit juices, all kinds of things that basically the British could only dream of.
If you did see American soldiers, if you were children, you followed them and you called out after them, "Got any gum, chum?" And if you were lucky, they would throw some chewing gum. If you were even luckier, they would throw you some sweets.
Life is so dull and drab, and suddenly these incredibly glamorous men, and quite a few women as well, turn up, and they are so much of another world. They're taller and bigger, they talk differently, they have that film star kind of background, if you like.
One thing GIs couldn't help with, though, were the Christmas decorations. So, watching their pennies, resourceful Brits used whatever they could to brighten up their homes at Christmas.
Your instructions are contained within this envelope, important documents enclosed. Oh, Christmas decorations.
Oh, cool.
Just because things are a bit short doesn't mean you can't have a beautiful Christmas. There are many ways you can create decorations from simple things you've got around the house. Frosted twigs and holly leaves, Epsom salts, glue, then light bulb baubles. Simply paint the glass bulbs in any colour or pattern you wish. And when dry, hang them upside down on your tree by tying cotton twine around the fitting.
Cool.
Right then.
Right, let's give you some newspaper to put down.
By now, Christmas decorations were almost all homemade.
It's not even a discussion about how we're going to decorate the house for Christmas. You're going to decorate the house by cutting up old newspapers to make paper chains.
You painting the paper chains? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I thought you would just glue them.
Little sort of bits of foliage and whatever, and you could stick Epsom salts to look like frost.
Oh, look at that. That looks so cool.
It's like it's snowing.
I absolutely love making the homemade decorations. It was great just to use things that you'd find outside, so pine cones and acorns, and they just look so lovely. That's a cool idea, isn't it, to use old light bulbs?
Yeah.
Would we loop it round there? Oh, wow, yours looks really cool.
We made our own decorations with foil milk bottle tops. We used to make them into little bells and then thread a thread of cotton with a needle through the top so it hung down like a bell.
You enjoying this?
Yeah.
It's quite good, isn't it? It takes up lots of time.
Yeah, instead of going out and buying stuff.
I'll be rooting around the house trying to find what we can use to create our own decorations at home.
You go quiet when we concentrate. It's like really weird. Like silence.
Coming up, the final wartime Christmas. And as Britain freezes, an ingenious solution to the cold.
Oh, and there's a brick in the oven. Wonderful.
As the sixth wartime Christmas approached, Britain was experiencing a brutal winter. Much of southern England was enveloped by freezing fog, and with coal still rationed, keeping warm called for creativity.
There is a treat in the oven for you. Right. Oh, and there's a brick in the oven. Wonderful. Make, do, and mend. Keep yourself warm at night with a hot water brick. When you take your dinner out of the oven, don't waste the heat that's left. Put a brick in to warm up and absorb the heat. Then when it's time for bed, you can remove the brick. Wrap it in a towel, just as you would a hot water bottle, and use it to keep warm. Oh, how lovely. I think that'll do. Pop that in there. Can't imagine it will be super comfortable. It's better than a cold bed. Oh, lovely. Snuggle up with us. My husband's at war. Ooh, lovely.
Although victory over the Nazis was in sight, there was a new worry for millions of British families. In 1940, they'd had to cope with the Blitz. Now the enemy had returned with its so-called vengeance weapons, the V1 and V2.
The V1 was a flying bomb. It was a pilotless plane. It was a doodlebug. It was basically a very large jet engine which was carrying a ton of explosive. You could hear it coming overhead. You then hear it cut out. And so you had some idea if it was close. The V2 was a fear weapon. It was so devastating, it was so fast that you had no way of knowing it was coming until it was already upon you.
It was like science fiction. It was a war by machines. These were just machines raining death down on us. For some people, this was the last straw.
By Christmas, the V weapons had killed over 5,500 British civilians. In London that year, the government had opened 5 deep-level bomb-proof shelters. For families throughout the capital, they were a lifesaver.
We're sat 36.5 metres below ground level in one of the upper levels of one of the 16 sub-shelters of Clapham South Deep Level Shelter, and that's the Northern Line train going over our heads in the tunnel above it. The space that we're sat in now would eventually shelter 500 people. It's a bit hard to imagine that with it stripped bare. But imagine 500 steel bunks in there with everybody bedding, chatter, snoring, much worse, I'm sure, people smoking, and the gentle whir of the air conditioning. So it would have been quite an atmospheric place to be in.
Construction of these deep shelters began after one of the most horrifying incidents of the Blitz. A Luftwaffe bomb had penetrated the London Underground, killing 66 people.
It highlighted that even sheltering in the tube didn't necessarily mean that you were going to be safe.
By Christmas 1944, Clapham South Shelter alone was providing comfort to around 2,500 people.
Shelters were, of course, open during Christmas as the war was still on, and staff did go to some efforts to try and make it a little bit more Christmassy. They would put up decorations and make a little bit of extra effort with the food. It's likely that they would have played kind of Christmas carols and Christmas time music and made the spirit of Christmas come alive. All of the footage that I've seen of people sheltering down here, be it photo or film, people look genuinely happy. And I think it's because you knew you were safe. And so people did relax. They could have the first good night's sleep, perhaps, since the war began.
But for those who could stay in their houses at Christmas, there was still joy to be had. And the Deckers are beginning to realise that a wartime Christmas isn't so bad after all.
Ooh, let's decorate our Christmas tree. Right, so I think first we should stick in foliage. Chicken wire Christmas tree. Ow. Ooh, it's prickly, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some holly in here as well, so.
My branches keep falling.
So maybe put them through more than one hole and try and get the bottom part.
It's quite prickly.
But there's a good spot there. I kind of enjoyed it, like getting sticks and putting them on the tree.
Now, which way is it falling so we can put some more?
It keeps coming your way, so we need to put it this way.
Something, yeah.
I like how they recycled old light bulbs and they painted it to use it as baubles. It's very clever.
Oh, cool.
There's bells in them.
I think it's kind of made me think, like, we don't have to always go out and buy stuff.
Oh, where should I hang this? So many good places. I could put it there. It keeps falling. It's falling. It's falling. It's falling.
It's looking different to what we're used to, but it's looking pretty cool. Do you think?
Definitely.
Look at those bauble light bulb lights. They look really cool, don't they?
Yeah.
The kids have kept the 2 light bulbs. They're ready and waiting to go on the tree once it's up, and they can't wait to put them on. There you go. Ta-da!
1944 would turn out to be the last wartime Christmas that the British public had to endure. 4.5 months later, on the 8th of May 1945, Prime Minister Winston Churchill announced that Germany had surrendered.
We may allow ourselves
a brief period of rejoicing. Today is Victory in Europe Day.
The intense strain of war the people had withstood was finally over, and the streets erupted in spontaneous emotion.
There was an awful lot of celebration. There was an awful lot of good humour. There wasn't an awful lot of alcohol. In Glasgow, over the 2 days, only one woman was booked with being drunk and disorderly. Many people in London, of course, did go up to Buckingham Palace to see the King and Queen and the princesses come out onto the balcony. And at one point, Churchill came out with them, and that was a huge roar. There was a lot of people letting off steam.
For all who'd lived through the conflict, it was a time never to be forgotten. And the end of the war also meant that the soldiers who'd fought abroad were home at last, including Dad Phil, in time for a family Christmas.
So my favourite part of the whole experience, I really liked making the homemade Christmas decorations, and I really liked making the egg. Oh yeah, might as well use it all up, don't want to waste any.
Wartime Britain saw ordinary people get through economic hardship with cheerful determination and inventiveness.
To have to do all those things for many years, you know, possibly 5, 6 years, it would have been really draining, really hard. It really makes me respect what they went through at those times.
Especially at Christmas, just to be able to make the most of what they had and to make it as special as they could is phenomenal, really.
I think we need to be more grateful about what we've got now and just realise how hard it was for them and how lucky we are